Yoshi's Cookie, the 1992 puzzle game originally released for the NES and Game Boy, somehow has one of the weirdest copyright situations tied to it. It originally started life as an arcade game concept called Hermetica, created by Japanese developer Home Data, which would have been an alchemy-themed puzzle game, but it didn't do well during location testing and was scrapped. The developers wanted to repurpose the game for the consumer market, so Bulletproof Software of Tetris fame bought the rights to the game, gave it a few modifications, and in turn licensed it to Nintendo to form the basis of what would become Yoshi's Cookie. BPS would later release their own version of Hermetica for Japanese phones under the name Inaro in the early 2000s, in addition to creating a shell company aptly titled Intellectual Property Consultants Incorporated, which continued to license the Inaro game concept to Nintendo whenever a new version of Yoshi's Cookie was released, which is why its appearance in the Nintendo Puzzle Collection and re-release on Wii Virtual Console all mention Inaro and Intellectual Property Consultants by name. Evidently though, Yoshi's Cookie faced its share of licensing issues, as it was delisted from the Wii Shop channel in most regions in 2013, a Wii U Virtual Console release was planned and seen in the trailer but ended up never releasing, and as of this video it has yet to see a re-release on Nintendo Switch Online. It appears that Intellectual Property Consultants was involuntarily dissolved in June 2020 though, which means the rights to Inaro and to an extent Yoshi's Cookie either somehow made its way back to BPS and absorbed into the Tetris company, or we just simply do not know without having a lawyer track it all down. You know what, screw it, while we're on the topic of Yoshi's Cookie, in 1994, a Japan-only special re-release of the game, subtitled Cookies in Kuruppon Oven, was made in collaboration with National, an appliance brand used by Panasonic in the 90s. As the name suggests, it was a promotional tie-in with their new Kuruppon Oven, and features an additional mode where you can view actual recipes for making real-life Yoshi cookies, or play minigames revolving around cookie baking, like gathering ingredients in a kitchen cabinet. Somehow only 500 copies of this game were made, making this one of the rarest Super Famicom games in existence. A loose cartridge of the game recently popped up on Yahoo Auctions Japan for the asking price of 150,000 yen, or a little over $1,000 in US dollars. Which I suppose is not too bad for a game that only has 500 copies, but I don't have the disposable income to throw around for that. The game processor RAM cassette though, now that's what I'm down for. Wario Land II for the Game Boy was released twice in Western countries. First as a regular Game Boy game, then a few months later as a black cartridge that added Game Boy Color enhancements while still supporting the original Game Boy. However, if you start a new save file on the Game Boy Color then switch to the Game Boy or vice versa, you'll get an error message saying the save data is not compatible between systems, and you'll either have to switch back to the other system or delete your save data. Somehow no one has figured out why this check exists in the first place. If you hack the game to remove this check, then the save file appears to work just fine between systems. If you're going to gatekeep your save file to only being playable on one system, at least have a better excuse than Super Mario Maker for Nintendo 3DS. Everyone knows that each Nintendo system has their own three-letter product name that usually corresponds to their codename. You know, DOL for Dolphin, RVO for Revolution, NTR for Nitro, the works. The product code for the original 3DS model is CTR, which some people have gone on to interpret as Citrus. But we actually know what CTR really stands for from a leak of Nintendo emails dating around 2006. And it stands for Centrair, which is a possible reference to the Chubu Centrair International Airport in Japan. You probably know that the DSi and 3DS share the same charging connector, but the DSi isn't the first Nintendo device to use this connector plug. That honor goes to the Nintendo Wi-Fi Network Adapter, a successor to the Nintendo Wi-Fi USB connector which was released in Japan on September 18, 2008, 2 months before the release of the DSi. And now you know why the DSi and 3DS chargers have a model number that starts with WAP. WAP001 is indeed reserved for a Nintendo-branded router. Why was Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels titled The Lost Levels for its eventual Western release? According to the book Super Mario Bros. 2 by John Irwin, we may have Nintendo of America marketing manager Gail Tilden to thank, who also oversaw the launch of the NES in 1985. Around 1991, Tilden proposed a marketing campaign for the Nintendo Power magazine called The Lost Levels, where NES cartridges of the Japanese version of Super Mario Bros. 2 will be given out as a free gift to Nintendo Power subscribers, similar to an earlier promotion that gave away free copies of Dragon Warrior. A prototype NES cartridge of The Lost Levels was produced internally, but plans for the campaign eventually fell through, and The Lost Levels would later be released under their originally planned name as a part of Super Mario All-Stars. The recently uncovered Photo Dojo DX tech demo on the 3DS, more on that in my last video, doesn't have a lot of music. Aside from the menu themes, there's only a single track that plays throughout the demo, while there are stage clear fanfares and a boss theme that was found unused in its data. Although surprisingly, the main stage theme in Photo Dojo DX would end up being reused 8 years later, and I'm not joking, in the Nintendo Labo vehicle kit. On the Nintendo DS Lite, selecting the brightness setting on the system menu will cycle between 4 different screen brightness options. Meanwhile, on the original DS, this setting simply turns the backlight on or off. However, some early DS games like Super Mario 64 DS have their own option to turn the backlight on or off. And this option also works on the properly backlit DS Lite. It may look like the screens just turned themselves off, but if you shine a light right up against the screen, yep, you can still see the pixels. Mahjong was the 5th game to be released for the Famicom in Japan, coming about a month after the Famicom's initial launch. As you can expect, being a version of Reichi Mahjong, it was never released anywhere outside of Japan. Except not quite, because in 1987, Mahjong was released in Hong Kong for their version of the Nintendo Entertainment System, making this the only version of Mahjong available for any version of the NES. So you know what that means, this game now sells for big money. A boxed copy in average condition sold on Heritage Auctions in July 2023 for a whopping $12,000 US. And finally, this is the US cartridge for F-Zero X. If you don't spot anything wrong with it, you have 5 seconds to click away before I ruin it for you. They cropped the cartridge artwork incorrectly, so some of the Japanese logo still peeks out a bit at the bottom. This is also true for the PAL version.